ke a leboga. Ke a leboga, ke a leboga haholo. Dumelang. Sanibonani. Avuxeni. Dimasiari. Goeiemiddag. Lotjani. Le a lahle a jwale. Motsamaisa mosebetsi ke o dumedise. Ke dumedise di-minister tsa rona, Minister Chikunga, o qetang ho bua hona jwale mona. A ileng a mpitsa hore ke tle mona. Ke dumedise le Minister Mamoloko Kubai, le Premier wa rona wa Freestata, le di MEC tse a sebetsang le tsona. Ke dumedise le di Deputy Minister tse teng mona, le di maloko a Palamente e kgolo ya naha e ko Cape Town, le legislature ya hona mona Freestata. Ke dumedise le Executive Mayor wa mona Mangaung, Councillor Gregory Ntatisi. Ke dumedise le baetapele ba mekgatlo yohle ya dipolotiki ba teng mona. Ke dumedise baruti ba hara rona mona. Ke dumedise le maloko le baetapele ba mekgatlo ya setjhaba e teng ka hara rona, le bao ba na leng di-business tsa bona ke ba dumedise. Ke dumedise lona kaofela ba leng di-delegates tsa Men's Indaba. Ke thabile haholo ho ba mona Freistata, haholo ho ba kopanong yena e kgolo hakana. Ha ke soka ke ba kopanong e kgolo hakana Freistata e tletseng banna. Ke re ha ke eme mona ke sheba, ke bona majority ya batho ba leng mona ke bontate, ke bontate moholo, ke bo malome, ke bahlankana. Ha ke le sheba, ke bona batho ba ikemiseditseng ka nnete ho lwantsha gender-based violence and femicide. Ke a le leboha ho ba ha lona mona ka nnete. You are here as men of our country, but also supported, correctly so, by the women of our country, because you recognize that violence against women and children is not only a pandemic. During COVID-19, I did say that and declared that we have another pandemic, which is gender-based violence. A few days ago, we actually classified gender-based violence and femicide as a disaster. It's a national disaster. A national disaster that should make all the men in our country drop our heads in shame, drop our heads in sorrow. But I'm glad to be here because I see men who have chosen to come here to raise their heads in commitment, to raise their heads in determination, to bring an end to gender-based violence, and I applaud you for that, and I thank you. You are here because you have taken a stand, and you are ready to stand up and be counted as men and boys who declare that not in my name. I'd like to congratulate the provincial government for convening this men's Indaba and for the absolutely outstanding organization that I have never seen in the Free State, of seeing so many people seated and listening carefully. I say thank you to the provincial government for doing so. We are meeting as South Africa and the world as we observe 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The recent crime statistics for the first 2 quarters of 25 and 26 financial year paint a worrying picture. And despite there being a drop in serious crimes around the country, contact sexual offenses and attempted sexual offenses have gone up. That means that more women and girls and even young boys have been victims of sexual assault, rape, and attempted rape. And as we have heard, every day across this beautiful country of ours, the safety and dignity of women and children is being undermined by the actions of violent men who abuse our women, who abuse our sisters, our wives, our mothers, our grandmothers, and our little girls. As I've said many times in the past, gender-based violence is not a problem of women, as of men, and about the terrible men of our country. Some, in the name of culture and tradition, commit these crimes. In the name of proving their masculinity, commit these crimes. In the name of all forms of justifications, commit these crimes. Minister Chikunga and Minister Kubai and Minister Tolasha, the actions that continue to be taken. For example, we opened a sexual offences court, Kobutsabelo, as part of the ongoing work to support survivors and to ensure that they get justice for the crimes that are perpetrated against them. But the reality is that we can talk the whole day. Re ka bua e seng letsatsi le le leng, re ka bua matsatsi a mangata, but nnete ya sala. Nnete ke hore banna a re hlomphe basadi. Banna ha re bona batho ba basadi re bona dikatana fela. Ntho eo e tlamehile re fele. Men must respect the women of South Africa. They are the most valuable asset that this country has. And men must stop abusing the assets of this country, which are the women of our country. So what we now need to do as men is today, as I've seen and as I've heard, pledges have been made, speeches have been made, and I particularly liked the message of Professor Molefe Motsamai, Onaemi Mona. ke mo jweditse hore o bua ha monate ha a tshwane le professor empa o bua ha monate. And we want men like him to stand up and talk about what gender-based violence is doing to the women of our country. We want men like him to stand tall. And as we are all here today, we should all stand tall and say, not in our name, and all of us must make the same pledge that we will not raise a single finger or a single hand against the women of our country, that we will respect the women of our country, and that we will treat the women of our country with dignity, with consideration, and respect. And I am glad that by directly engaging ourselves as men in this whole challenge of gender-based violence, we will be able to send a very clear message, even to those who are not here, even to the women. We are the ones who must be the evangelists and send clear messages to them and make it clear that we as the men of South Africa have decided that we will not tolerate any man who raises a man, who rapes a woman and who murders a woman, because that is totally unacceptable to us as it impugns on our dignity as the men of South Africa. I'm not here to criticize all men. We are here because we see the men of our country as a solution. We've heard powerful testimony of from the men's sector who shared their experiences. And we know that across this country, there are millions of good and decent men and boys who would never even consider abusing or hurting a woman, and that they are tired of being told that all men are a problem. You want your voices to be heard, women and children in your lives and in our country, but by everyone. Yet at the same time, we know that it is time for the men of this country to stop being on the sidelines, to stop being spectators. Let us not think that our silence as men does not mean our complicity. Let us not assume that by looking away as another man abuses a woman, we are not guilty too, because this crime continues to fester in a culture of silence. What is the consequence of that silence? Children become frightened. Children regard it as normal, as one of the people who was testifying here. Women become terrified. Girlfriends become terrified. We have grieving mothers, and we have angry sons watching and also learning. So this man's Indaba is a clear statement that we are no longer outsourcing the fight against gender-based violence and femicide to women who are the victims. We know that change must begin with us. Ke rona ba tlameileng hore re bue ka gender-based violence. Ke rona ba tlameile hore re dule re bua ka yona, so that we must send the message very clearly. The reason why we have said it's a national disaster is because we want government, all of government, to be engaged in a number of ways to try to curb gender-based violence. But in the end, it is us as the citizens of South Africa, but more importantly as the men of South Africa, who must deal with gender-based violence. We cannot outsource it to the women of our country because they are the victims. We are the ones who must act and stop gender-based violence. South Africa has a crisis we don't speak about openly enough, and one of those crises is our broken families. The vast majority of children in our country don't live with their biological fathers. This is a terrible tragedy. The presence of a father in the home is important to shaping the attitudes and the behavior of boys, father figures, and this is heartbreaking. Yes, we know that not all fathers are good fathers. Yes, we know that other men, stepfathers, partners of the mothers or extended family continue to play a role in the lives of many boys. Yes, we know that the role of our history has played a terrible role in breaking up families, particularly black families. We must also acknowledge that there are other many reasons why men also desert their family units. But in the end, we have to call on men that once you become a father, your job and your duty is to become the father and not to run away and not to think you are outsourcing your role as a father, because families are built by present fathers. The fathers must always be present in the family to guide the children. We must also speak the truth. Many men in this country are shirking their responsibilities to their children, leaving their mothers, their grandparents, and other caregivers to struggle alone with raising them. It is said that more than 31% of men, yes, are unemployed. But even if you are unemployed, you need to continue raising and being present in the life of your children, particularly your sons. When it comes to youth unemployment rate, yes, we know that we have a huge youth unemployment rate. Young boys are increasingly dropping out of school. 4 in 10 learners are failing to finish school, and many of them are boys. Now, if fathers are present in their lives, the fathers are the ones who will take up the responsibility of making sure that these boys do not drop out of school. They will also be able to insist that these boys do not become gang members. They will also take up the responsibility of making sure that they do not fall susceptible to drugs. Now, this is the responsibility that we men must play in the lives of our young boys. And this is the role that is in many ways God-given that we must execute. Now, in the end, our dereliction of these problems, of these challenges, results in violence that is inbred as young people grow up. We heard from a testimony from one of my brothers who stood here and said that as he saw violence being perpetrated even in the family, he thought it was normal. And that is what he grew up with. And much as he held himself back from perpetrating violence, but the abuse issue stayed in his mind. It stayed in his heart, and he had to rid himself of that. And today we are saying, men must stop abusing women. Men must respect the women of our country. That is a responsibility that we have as men to the women of our country. We must rid ourselves of this. The image that is being pushed in communities, on television, on social media, and virtually everywhere, that violence is growing. And we are the ones who must curb that violence. The police will never be present everywhere. The police will never be present in your bedroom. The police will never be present in your sitting room. You are the one as a man who must police yourself. And we are saying, as men, let us be present in the lives of our boys so that our boys grow up to be the good men that South Africa needs. That treating women and girls in a particular way should show that we respect them. Relationships now, these days, have become a battleground. According to a survey on GBV published last year, a third of South African women say they have experienced physical violence in their lifetime, and in most of the cases have involved intimate partners. So the violence takes place between intimate partners. And that is why it is so important for us to have this type of dialogue and to talk to the men of our country. Now, these types of dialogues are important. More than 50% of women surveyed had also experienced psychological and emotional abuse. Again, in most cases, the perpetrator was someone they were in a relationship with. And most cases of femicide are committed by partners or ex-partners. Abuse does not only refer to bruises, it is broad-based. There are men and boys who have problems with alcohol and substance abuse, who terrorize their family members, their mothers and grandmothers, and they steal money and possessions for their next fix. This is another problem that we as communities must deal with. The abusers of women and children live amongst us. They are present amongst us on a daily basis. They are fathers, they are sons, they are grandfathers, they are uncles and cousins and friends. And as you hear the stories, they are truly horrendous stories of how women are abused. And in many ways, abusing a young girl or a woman by raping her, by abusing her in other ways, is like a death sentence. And in the end, we as men also kill the women of our country. And these things aren't happening in some faraway place. They are happening in our schools, at our places of worship, at workplaces, at places of higher learning, in nightclubs and in homes. And most shamefully, when they happen, the other men look away. And quite often, the community knows. It gets to know precisely what happened. And this is the reason why we must all stand up, particularly the men in our country. We must stand up and say, not in our name, not in our country, not in our community, not around us, and we will not allow it to happen as the men of South Africa. It must stop. And today, Bondati, we must be brave enough to say that whether it is physical, mental, economic, or in other forms of abuse of women, they are all abuse. And as men, we need to ask ourselves, of course, what are the deep-rooted causes and attitudes that we have towards women and girls that is fueling this type of behavior? And once we recognize them, we need to ask for help. The toxic masculinity, ntwe ya hore ke monna, lentswe la ka le tlamehile hore le mamelwe, hore la ke fihlile hae bosiu, mme or mosadi wa ka a robetse kapa partner ya ka e robetse, a tsohe, as Minister Chikunga was saying, ampehele because ke monna, hore mosadi a hona lentswe le a ka le beyang against lentswe la ka. That is toxic masculinity. And it goes against the tenets of our Constitution, because our Constitution says we are all equal. We are all equal, not only before the law, but we are equal to one another. A hona o mong o moholo ho feta o mong. Ra lekana kaofela. And re tlamehile hore we must act like ra lekana. Ha o fihla lapeng, o jwetse mme lapeng hore president o itse nna le wena ra lekana. Ra lekana. Re na le ditokelo tse tshwanang. And o mo jwetse hore president o itse go tloela kajeko lena ditokelo tsa hao le tsa ka di a tshwana. Ke yona tsela eno. The men of this country, yes, face a number of challenges. Challenges that are very difficult, that have to do with our past, but those challenges are not an excuse to abuse women. Our forebears, even as they face many challenges, they did not abuse our great-great-grandmothers. They did not abuse their wives, their sisters. They did not abuse the women that they lived with. We are supposed to do that. Now, let me be clear. There is no justification whatsoever for gender-based violence. Usike ware, ka hobane ke sebetse, ke yona ntho e nketsang hore ke otle mme lapeng. Le yona ntho ya jwala. It does not mean hore ha o nwele jwala o tlamehile hore o etse mosebetsi. Indaba must critically interrogate all these issues and lead the way for the country in imagining what it means to be a man in South Africa today. We need men's indabas and organized dialogues with men and boys across the country. And I can tell you, I can say that I am almost certain, Hori, all of you who are here, student center, to a point where the female student center, to a point where the female students were afraid to walk on campus in the evening. And some students had even been killed by their fellow students. The university leadership took it upon themselves to organize a men's dialogue on campus, the causes of gender-based violence. A men's dialogue on campus, the causes of gender-based violence. And they got them involved in dialogue over a number of weeks. And after that, they were able to finally see gender-based violence, the rape of women, the abuse of women being eliminated, the women then started saying, we are now able to walk around the campus at night without any fear. Now, this is what has happened in one of our university campuses. And that is why I'm calling upon all of us to get involved in men's dialogues, in dialogues right throughout the country. It is one of those things that I believe we need to do as part of getting rid of this disaster that has befallen our country. I'm calling upon men throughout the country, throughout their various formations, their organizations. It could be a soccer club, it could be a boxing club, it could be a debating club, it could be even a political organization branch. And I'm saying, from now on, let us talk openly about gender-based violence. Let us have dialogues. It can be dialogues of 3 people. It can be dialogues of 5 people. We don't need to be 5,000 like we are here today. But I applaud you for being 5,000 men who have come together in a dialogue like this. I really applaud you. Premier, you have initiated something really good, and let this be the beginning of a process that will spread throughout the country, that we should have dialogues. Men should meet and talk about gender-based violence. And yes, talk about those men who ply on young women. Yes, talk about those men who at work do not want to recognize the ability of women and expect hore ha motho wa mosadi a fumana promotion o tlameile hore a ye mpetong pele a ile robala le wena. Ntho eno, let's talk about it, because I have heard that it happens. There are men in authority. Men in authority, they operate silently. They expect women who should be recognized, promoted, and all that, not to get the promotion until they sleep with them. That too must end. Our dialogues must talk about that. And when I talk about this, ke fumana hore banna ba bangata a ba shape matsoho. A ba shape matsoho. Ke a le bona. Ke a le bona, ebile ke le shebile. Se ding o fumana hore le di shapela matsoho haholo. Ena yona, ka hobane it happens silently. A le shapele matsoho. E shapele matsoho le yona. So we need, I'm calling on all the men in our country, and men who are in leadership positions, to gather a number of men to hold these dialogues. And I'm stressing it because we have seen it working. We have seen it working at a campus, at a university in our country, where gender-based violence and the rape of young women was rife. And after they held their dialogues, their men's dialogues firstly, and then they mixed it with the women, it went down and it disappeared for that time. So we need to continue to talk about this. I have said to my ministers as well that I want to hear, even in government as leaders, that we must talk about gender-based violence. We must not keep quiet about it. We must raise this specter, this ugly specter of gender-based violence more publicly. I have consistently spoken about gender-based violence. And that is why during COVID, when it just raised its ugly head, we declared it, that's another pandemic. Now, we have classified it as a disaster. And we are going to be coming up with measures that are going to help us deal with it. But at the same time, this is a societal problem. All of society must join hands and deal with it. And we should not only deal with it during the 16 days of activism campaign. These engagements must provide men and boys with a safe space, yes, also to be vulnerable and to be honest without being stereotyped as abusers or potential abusers. There needs to be honest and open dialogue around what the conditions are that are making men turn into monsters, turn into terrible people who abuse women, who even kill women. We need to deal with how this happens, on what support mechanisms we need to embark upon to support and help men and boys who are struggling, on counseling and other platforms or other forms of psychological assistance or support. We need to come up with those as prevention measures as well. On the rehabilitation of gender-based violence offenders, we also need to look at that so we can break the cycle of violence once and for all. So in the end, we are calling for a very comprehensive approach to gender-based violence. It does not help the cause against gender-based violence that we are only intervening once perpetrators have already entered the criminal justice system. We need to take preventative efforts and having dialogues and raising the level of awareness and consciousness of men is a very important initiative. All of society must be part of this effort and support vulnerable men and boys who are often too ashamed to ask for help. South Africa does not need a so-called new generation. Babambarno, a new generation of men. It needs the men and boys of this generation to do better and to be better men and to be real men, because real men do not rape. Real men do not abuse their women. Real men, as Minister Chikunga said, love their women. They protect their women. They support their women. And they encourage their women to be better. And the other important thing, of course, that we need to remember is that even as men, we all have mothers. And many of us have sisters. And many of us have aunts. And many of us have grandmothers. We need to ask ourselves, and many of us have daughters, we need to ask ourselves whether what we do against other women in the form of abuse, assault, and rape is what we would want to see being done to our daughters, to our wives, to our mothers, and to our aunts, and so on. And the answer has to be no. And if that be the case, then you must be a real man and become the real South African man that we want to see. South Africa needs men who respect women, who are compassionate, who are accountable, and who are strong in character, not with their fists. We need men who are protectors of women, not perpetrators. We need men who are role models to other men, particularly young men, in how they engage with and treat women and girls. We need men who call out the ill treatment of women by other men and report crimes against those who rape and kill women. Men of South Africa, I call on you to stand up and be counted. Let us say resoundingly, not in our name. Let the men stand up and say, not in our name. Let me hear the men stand up and say, not in our name. And let me hear men saying, we will respect the women of South Africa. We will protect the women of South Africa. And we will respect the rights of the women of South Africa. As you are still on your feet, gender-based violence will fall when men rise. When men stand up like you are standing today, that's when gender-based violence will fall. That is how we as the men of South Africa then rise. And as we rise with our women. We love our women. We protect our women. And we all rise together because nothing can stop us. Let us all say, nothing can stop us from ending gender-based violence. Amandla. Ke a leboha.